Good morning, everyone. Welcome back once again to Center for Lit Live. I am Miss Andrews or Miss Megan, whichever you prefer, and I am so pleased to have you all back with me once again today to discuss another classic of children's literature. Today we have a classic indeed on the table. We are going to be discussing Kenneth Grahame's The Wind in the Willows, and my cover is delightful. It's the kind of cover that makes me want to illustrate children's books all my own. It's Mr. Toad being hilarious in every way. And I hope that you enjoyed this book and its art as much as I did. That's not your cover, Sam. What does your cover look like? You can describe it to me. This one is from the Puffin Classic series, and so I don't think it's typical, but there are some gorgeous renditions of this book. If you are into children's book illustrations, there are some fantastic ones. Have you guys ever heard of Robert Ingpen? I'm going to put his name in our chat box. But he has done one of the most beautiful renditions of this book. It's almost like his name is Ink Pen, and he's an illustrator, which I think is really funny. But his version, it's like full big pages and bright, vibrant colors. And if you haven't seen it, you should look it up. Sam, if you have that one, oh my goodness, you are so lucky. I think it helped to create an entire world of the riverbank to look at those illustrations. Anna Patrick Benson's are pretty good as well. I've heard of his. Yeah, there are some. This book is artistic in every way. The illustrations alone are noteworthy, but the story is even more vibrant, I would argue. I think the way that Kenneth Grahame depicts a setting is so vivid. It's really vivid. It makes me feel like I'm right there and I'd want to be there. So Evan, if your version doesn't have pictures at all, that's okay. I think that Kenneth Grahame is a master of painting a scene with his words. So hopefully your mental picture of the place is still vivid and beautiful. Looks like, oh, Anna, oh, I was going to go take Kay's question, and I will in just a moment, Kay. I see your hand. But Anna says that the book was kind of wordy and hard to read. I identify with this. I know that his sentence structures were kind of long. It looks like Eli and Evan both agree that the sentences were a little hard to follow. This is because Kenneth Grahame wrote a good while ago, a generation past, if you will. And so some of his language is a little bit antiquated, depending on how you speak today. It's not quite how we speak, a little bit confusing. So if you read it nice and slowly, and you know to give it a little grace as kind of a vintage story in some ways, hopefully you fall into the language almost like with a Shakespeare play. How many of you guys have tried to read a Shakespeare play? This is an elementary class, so probably not many. But have you ever tried to read one? Or has anyone tried to read one to you? The language in a Shakespeare play is absolutely incomprehensible at first. You think, oh my goodness, this is a different language. This isn't in English. But if you give it a minute and you give yourself to the story, it's almost like you fall into the language and you start to pick it up in context. And I think Wind in the Willows is not as extreme an example of that, but it's the same idea. Go nice and slow and you'll get some from context. Oh, James, is that your sad news that you do not like The Wind in the Willows? Well, give me a chance here in this class. I'm going to try and change your mind about it. We'll see. You don't have to like it by the end, but you do have to give it a chance. And if I were one-on-one with you, James, I would make you tell me why you didn't like it. So compose an answer that's got a really specific point. Why don't you like The Wind in the Willows? Do you have a good reason? Because if not, it's not allowed. You have to like it. I'll wait to read your answer. Kay, let me take your question now.
Hi, Miss Andrews.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Great. It's good to have you with us today. What can I help you with?
I know that we're doing the book Inkheart next,
Mm-hmm.
and I wondered, is it by Cornelia Funk?
That's the one. Yep.
Okay,
and her
just
name
making
will be a
sure.
topic of discussion because it's got an E on the end and she's technically German, so I don't really know how to say it. It looks like Funk or Funke.
Okay.
Funky, depending on how you want to say it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. That is our next book. And for those of you who haven't started it yet, you should get right on it. It's not hard, but it is long. So start reading soon. How about you, Anna S?
Can you hear me?
I sure can.
So another thing I found kind of confusing is it feels like it kind of should be two books.
Oh, The Wind in the Willows does?
Mm-hmm. Because
Point.
like the first half is like about Mole and Ratty's like adventures, and you kind of lean towards Mole as the protagonist. And then at the second half, it kind of switches, and then it's all about Toad basically. And it was a little bit confusing, and I liked kind of both sides, but it was a little hard to transition in between the two things.
That is a Center for Lit veteran kind of way to read a book, Anna. I'm very proud of the way that you've thought about this book and read it closely already, even before we've come together to talk about it. You've put your finger on the hard thing about this book. It has more than one possible protagonist, and so that will be one of the major focuses of our discussion today. So way to put your
Okay.
finger on it. I will make sure and address that, but I'm not going to tell you the right answer yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Good reading, Anna. Thank you. All right, we got one more hand here before we get started. Oh, actually two, I take it back. Miranda and then Abigail. Go ahead, Miranda.
I didn't like how the chapters were so long.
Oh yeah, not exactly bite-sized pieces. I understand that. That also is because of the time in which it was written. Longer chapters lead to good read aloud time. So the parent reading aloud to the kid was kind of the way that you would interact with the story rather than the kid reading on his own. I think the little bite-sized chapter chunks started more when the kid was given the book on his own and told to read chapters at a time. So think about this one more as a read aloud, a parent leading you through the story.
I liked Toad because he really resembled a child, and Badger, he was just so strict with him.
Yes, already we are going close to a character conversation, and I am excited to hear it. I think that the characters in this setting are really interwoven in this story, and you already are guessing as to the purpose in those conversations. I love it. Well, I'm going to take Abigail's question, and then we're going to get started with our conversation today. I know that we have limited time, and I want to make sure and give you all the chances in the world to talk about the characters. So, Abigail, you are our last question before we begin.
This is sort of like Anna's question, but I think but I've actually talked about this book before when I was younger with my parents. We thought that Toad was the protagonist, and I still think that because he changes the most and he sort of ties the story together, and he's got the most compelling conflict.
Excellent. All of which are excellent reasons to choose a protagonist. You clearly are a good reader and you've got a good foundation for your premise. I'm going to actually write your name down, Abigail, and come back to you when we get to our conversation about protagonists, which will be shortly. And I'll make sure and let you have a full say on why you think Toad should be the protagonist. Fun. I can't wait. Well, in the meantime, everyone, I want to start where we always do, kind of back us up a little bit to talk about the setting of our story before we dive into characters. I know that characters are tempting and that we want to kind of live there, at least I do whenever I read a story. But our story actually has a huge emphasis on place. Not just in the introduction, but all throughout our story, place is really central, even to theme in our story. So I want to take a good long look at the places in which our story happens. I've given you a list of the various places, and I'd like us to go one at a time and talk about the settings in the story. So if you guys wouldn't mind volunteering to speak at this point, I'm going to come to a few of you and let you fill in the blanks. But our story begins with Mole underground in his home in Mole End. And I'd love to call on a couple of you and have you tell me, what is his home like and why in the world would he leave it? James, will you get us started? Tell me about Mole End.
Could you give me just a second, please?
Of course. Would you like me to call on somebody else and come back to you?
Sure, maybe I could do the riverbank next.
Okay, I'll come to you in a little minute. All right, how about you, Evan K? Can you tell me about the Mole End? Are you there, Evan? You're unmuted. Uh-oh, you might have some mic trouble today. I'm not sure why, Evan. Usually I can talk to you okay. I wonder if you came with a different microphone than usual. Stephen, how about you?
Hello.
Hello.
So we're talking about Moland.
Yes, what is Mole's home like? It's the very first setting that we get a picture of.
Well, Moland is Mole's home. It's in a hill, I believe, next to the river.
Okay, is it next to the river? Does he even know about the river at the beginning?
Well, he doesn't know about the river in the beginning, so probably not.
It's in a field. When he comes up after the up we go scene, he comes up into a bright field, right? So his home, as with all moles, is underground. Give me a couple adjectives to describe his home, Stephen.
His home is small and not as grand, but it's it's like cozy and comfy and like nice in its own way.
Cozy, comfortable. I like that. Nice in its own way. So would you say it's homey?
Yeah, it's like you wouldn't expect it to be a nice place, but it is.
Yeah, it is. It's a nice place. And is he proud of it?
No,
Not at the beginning. Why not?
because you think it's so boring and not impressive compared to Toad Hole and then Rat's home and Badger's home.
Yeah, okay. So it feels to him at the beginning of the story, even before he's met all those other characters and seen where they live, his own home feels small and cramped and isolated, and he wants to get out. How come?
Because he wants to stop cleaning.
Okay. Avoid his responsibilities. He's got spring cleaning. Any other motivation to leave home?
He kind of feels trapped there.
What waits for him outside of his hole?
Friends.
Yes, okay. So he wants to adventure, but he also wants friends. He wants relationships. And he doesn't live with anyone underground, does he?
No, he doesn't.
He wants friends. He wants to build relationships and be a part of a larger community. Okay, excellent. So his home, while snug and cozy and close, doesn't afford him everything he needs. And so he looks out to the world, hoping to find more things. Would you say that Mole is an old mole, Stephen?
I wouldn't say he's old, like middle-aged.
You think he's middle-aged?
Yeah, like not old.
What clues you in to how old Mole might be? Any details about his character or his perspective on the world, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, the way he talks, like, I just don't imagine a kid, like, saying, oh dear, a bunch and kind of acting serious a lot.
Okay.
He acts serious. He acts serious and sometimes childish, but I think childish is just his personality, not his age.
Okay, good. Maybe you might be right. That's an important distinction, that he acts childish in his personality rather than maybe his actual age. But what is it that's childish about his personality? Do you think he knows who he is yet?
No, I don't think so.
Doesn't
Because
know
he
yet.
doesn't.
How do
Because
you
he
know?
doesn't really see the importance in himself later that comes later in the story.
Ah. What do you mean doesn't see the importance in himself? Like doesn't know what he has to offer as a friend?
More like in the story, he helps like them take back Toad Hall, and he helps them, and he like is really good friends with them. In the beginning, he just doesn't know that's what he's about to do. He just doesn't see he's important that much, I feel like.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Good comment, Stephen. It almost feels like when he looks up from his home and says, you know what, hang spring cleaning, bother all of this nonsense here in my space. I don't think this is good enough. I'm going outside to find what's better. He is on a journey of self-discovery. He's leaving his own space and looking out to the world to grow and change him in some ways, right? So already we see this combination of setting and characters, new beginnings in both ways. Mole's going to be changed by where he goes next. Make sense?
Yep.
Good. Nice job, Stephen. Good comments. All right, so Mole End is where we begin, but we move fairly quickly to our next space, the riverbank. And I would love to call on a couple people for this one because the riverbank is one of the most significant places in all the story. So James, I told you I'd come back to you. Can you give me an opening detail or two about the riverbank?
All right, so I heard there's sparkling and chatting, rustle and swirl, chatter and bubble. There's lots of glints, and apparently it's the water rat's house.
Okay, very good. So it's full of life and light, but it's also the water rat's house. Is the water rat the only one who lives on the riverbank?
Well, it said there's chatter, so there must be more. It
Yeah,
can't.
there must be more. What kinds of creatures live on the riverbank?
Maybe certain frogs or toads.
Okay, we've got frogs and toads and rats. What other kind of creatures?
Fish and turtles.
Otters, fish, and turtles. Absolutely. What about birds?
Yeah, maybe
Birds
like
of all sorts.
hmm.
Doesn't the rat write a poem about a kind of creature?
Oh yeah.
We are down a dabbling, up tails all. He even sings a little song to himself about ducks, right?
Ducks and geese.
Ducks and geese, very good, absolutely. So we get this idea, James, I love that this is your first detail, that the riverbank is full of life. It's teeming with life, right? In the water, there are creatures that live there. In the banks of the river, there are creatures. Above the river, swooping around it, you have beautiful birds, right? It is full of life. So we have Mole underground, isolated by himself, coming out into this community full of people and friendship possibilities, right? Wow, that's incredible. All right, good. Anything else you want to tell me about the riverbank?
May I take a look at the poem?
Absolutely.
All right. So apparently, according to the poem, apparently it says, slushy green undergrowth where the roach swim. Here we keep our larder cool, full, and dim. Everyone for what he likes, we like to be. Heads down, tails up, dabbling free.
Ah, free. The riverbank does feel kind of free, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Free and cool and easy.
Yeah.
This feels like a pretty good place to live. I don't know about you, but of all the settings in this story, the riverbank is the one that calls to me the most.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something about it. I actually love, James, that you were reading from the poem. I'm going to draw us back to the very first description of the river. It's on page 3 of my book. I don't know if it's the same as yours, but Mole's paragraph starts. He thought his happiness was complete when, as he meandered aimlessly along, suddenly he stood by the edge of a full-fed river. Now let's read this description right here. Everybody listen closely to how the river is described. Never in his life had he seen a river before. This sleek, sinuous, full-bodied animal, chasing and chuckling, gripping things with a gurgle and leaving them with a laugh, to fling itself on fresh playmates that shook themselves free and were caught and held again. All was a shake and a shiver, glints and gleams and sparkles, rustle and swirl, chatter and bubble. The mole was bewitched, entranced, fascinated. By the side of the river he trotted as one trots when very small, by the side of a man who holds one spellbound by exciting stories. And when tired at last, he sat on the bank, while the river still chattered on to him, a babbling procession of the best stories in the world, sent from the heart of the earth to be told at last to the insatiable sea. Now, the reason I read you this is not only because it's surpassingly lovely, but also because of a device that the author is using to make this river come to life. What does he compare the river to in this passage? And anybody can answer this one in the chat box. What does he compare the river to? Oh, good, Evangeline. At first, he compares the river to an animal. It's alive in its own way, right? It gurgles and chuckles. Yeah, good, Evangeline. It talks, right? It absolutely has a personality. And we have a name for this. When something in the natural world is given a personality, what do we call that? Good, everyone. Personification. So the river is personified as an animal. Now, this gets a little bit trickier when we think about the fact that every character in our story is an animal, right? And how are the animals described? Are they described as animals only? No, they're described as people. And we actually have a different word for this. When an animal is given human characteristics, so it's already alive, but it's made human, then we call that, ready for this? Drum roll, please. Anthropomorphism. On your own, right now, everybody try to say that. Anthropomorphism. Yeah, and the word is right there for you at the top of the screen in case you want to see it. But it basically means animals made into human beings. So mole and rat and toad, etc. All the characters in our story have been anthropomorphized. Exactly. So we've got the riverbank being personified as an animal and the animals being personified as human beings. That's the literary device that he's working with for the whole story. Good. All right, but back to the river. It's been personified as an animal, alive and playful. And then there's one more step at the end of that description that I just read to you. Mole trotting along by the riverbank. How does he feel? What does he feel like? He does feel free, Sam, you're right. But there's another comparison here. He says, he feels small. Good, Noah. He feels small. He trots as one trots when very small, by the side of a man who holds one spellbound by exciting stories. So who's the storyteller in that comparison? The river. Yes. What kind of stories does the river have to tell Mole? Exciting ones. Yes, wonderful, beautiful ones. Where do they lead to? They go on forever to tell their story where eventually? To the heart of the sea. There's something about a river. It stays in its banks. It's always there, but it's always changing, right? This is almost like a picture of life itself, right? Life is whispering to Mole as it continues on its journey, always changing, always continuing, but somehow always the same. There's something kind of magical in this description of the river that captures readers' attentions right at the outset, continuing on to the sea. And if we were in doubt as to whether we should think of Mole as a grown-up or a kid, his description as a little kid trotting along, holding someone's hand as the river tells him stories, makes us think of him as a kid in some ways, doesn't it? Telling little Mole all about exciting adventures to the heart of the sea. Good. It's kind of funny. Yeah, cute, trusting little Mole. I love it. Absolutely, Kay. All right. Now, we immediately get, I'm sorry, I got something in my contact just now. We immediately get a picture of a character who lives on the riverbank. And though we're not going to talk about Rat at this moment, hearing what he says about the riverbank helps us understand it in some ways. So let me call on somebody else. What does Rat say about the riverbank? What does he think of where he lives? Callie, do you know?
He's, uh,
He says it's like the only place to live in the world.
Yes, he says it's the only place to live in the world. Is that true?
No, but he thinks it's the best place.
Ah, why does he think it's the best place? What makes him think it's the best place in the world?
Because it's so full of life and and it helps him with everything.
It helps him with everything. It's home to him. He says, whether you get away, nothing seems to matter. That's the charm of it. Whether you get away or whether you don't, whether you arrive at your destination or whether you reach somewhere else, or whether you never get anywhere at all, you're always busy and you never do anything in particular. And when you've done it, there's always something else to do, and you can do it if you like or not. Sometimes it's better if you don't. Is there an adjective to describe this mentality? This feels like a summer day to me. Have you ever felt like this, Callie, where the day is stretching out before you and you could do all kinds of things? Or maybe you just want to lay down under a tree and watch the sun shine through the leaves. You could do something, but you don't have to. What is that feeling like?
Freedom.
Freedom, absolutely. Can you think of more?
Have no responsibility.
Yeah, no responsibilities. Yeah, it's unhurried, right? You're not in a hurry. Are people rushing one place to another? Are they anxious on the riverbank?
No, they're just kind of laid back.
Yeah, I like that. Good word, Callie. Laid back. What do you think they think is the most important, these riverbankers?
To help each other and to to enjoy life.
Yes, very good. Enjoyment of life and helping one another. I think those are the two most important things to riverbankers. Very good. All right, excellent. Nice job, Callie. So these riverbankers value, and I think we all would if we were lucky enough to live on the riverbank, they value their community, the place that they are, and they keep their minds focused. Here's where we are, and we are content. That is a good word to describe riverbankers. They are contented. All right, very good. Yes, Miranda, go ahead with your question.
So at the beginning of chapter 11, there's this one word that I didn't know what it meant.
Oh, okay.
It's called subterfuges.
Subterfuges?
Subterfuges.
Oh, hold on. At the beginning of which chapter?
Chapter 11.
Chapter 11. Okay, hold on. Coming to you right now. Like summer tempests came his tears, that chapter?
Yes.
Subterfuge. Is that the word subterfuge with a T?
Yeah, subterfuge.
Yeah, subterfuge.
It says, then such escapes, such disguises, and such subterfuges.
I see that now, Miranda. Subterfuge is basically like disguises and secrecy as you try to escape.
That makes sense.
Does that make sense? We'll talk more about that when we get to that section of the story, but that's what that word means. Subterfuge is like lying and hiding for the purpose of pulling something off, like a spy mission. Okay, however, we're not thinking about that chapter just yet. We're still thinking about the riverbank and the qualities of riverbankers. As we think about this, as we think about the riverbank and its calm, laid back, carefree, contented lifestyle, and we experience that with Mole as he's sitting here with Rat, sculling along on the riverbank. He sees some trees beyond the riverbank, and he asks about them. What's beyond the riverbank? Let's just build out our world here and finish up our discussion of setting. What is beyond the riverbank? Mary, do you know?
Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Well, there's the wide world.
Ah, okay. Is the wide world right beyond the riverbank?
Well, actually, isn't there like the wildwood or something?
Yes, there's the wild wood and then the wide world. Let's go in order. Tell me about the wide wood first, or the wild wood, excuse me.
The wildwood, it's kind of creepy and dark, and some bad animals live there.
Okay, what kind of animals live here?
I think weasels and stoats or something.
Ah, okay. Typically, from Aesop's fables, way back in our childhoods, animals are sometimes associated with character qualities. What would you say that weasels and stoats and foxes are associated with in terms of character?
Slyness.
Slyness. Anything else?
Um,
They're often,
Dishonest.
yes, very good. Dishonest, kind of sneaky, sly, dishonest. Sometimes can be cruel and evil, right?
Cunning.
Yeah, good word. Cunning, and even vicious sometimes. You get the picture, right? Okay, so different kinds of animals live here. Does rat never go to the wild wood?
I think he goes. Maybe he's gone before, but I don't think he really ever goes anymore.
Interesting. Let's go to the section here together. If you have your book with you, it's page 9 in this chapter. Mole says, "What lies over there?" asked the mole, waving a paw towards a background of woodland that darkly framed the water meadows on one side of the river. "Oh, that? Oh, that's just the wild wood," said the rat shortly. "We don't go there very much, we riverbankers." Aren't they very nice people in there?" said the mole, a trifle nervously. Oop, sorry for that. "Well," replied the rat, "let me see. The squirrels are all right, and the rabbits, some of them, but rabbits are a mixed lot. And then there's Badger, of course. He lives right in the heart of it. Wouldn't live anywhere else either if you paid him to do it. Dear old Badger. Nobody interferes with him. They'd better not," he added significantly. "Why? Who should interfere with him?" asked the mole. "Well, of course, there are others," explained the rat in a hesitating sort of way. "Weasels, and stoats, and foxes, and so on. They're all right in a way. I'm very good friends with them, past the time of day when we meet and all that. But they break out sometimes. There's no denying it. And then, well, you can't really trust them. And that's the fact. So let me ask you, Mary, what do you think he means by they break out sometimes? What's so bad about these animals?
Well, they're not trustworthy.
Ah. Can you predict when they'll keep their promise and when they won't?
No.
Unpredictable. Would you say that the riverbankers are predictable?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. We know what's most important to them, and it always will be. But these guys in the wild wood, they can betray you at unexpected times. Yeah, what do you think they're motivated by most? Is it love for you and thought for you as their neighbor?
No.
What do you think they're motivated by?
Greed and power and selfishness.
Absolutely. Very good. Motivated by greed, power, and selfishness, which we will definitely see worked out in the story itself. They're thinking of themselves, and as a result, they're unpredictable and untrustworthy. Good, Mary. Nice job. Anything else you want to tell me about the wild wood? There is one exception to this overarching rule. Who lives in the
Badger.
heart of the wild wood? Yes, the badger. What's he like? Is he like all the stoats and weasels and foxes?
No, he's very kind and honest and stern.
Good. Kind, honest, and stern. And maybe not altogether safe, though. Is he predictable?
No.
No. Can you give me specifics?
What do you mean?
Well, in what way is he unpredictable? In what context do you see that? When you say, "Hi, Badger, want to come over for coffee?" Will he always say yes?
No.
No, it'll depend on his mood, right? Can he be dangerous?
Yes.
Yes. In fact, that's why he can live in the heart of the wild wood and not fear all these other animals. He's as dangerous as they are, right? It's even alluded to that maybe he was violent in the past and now he is more calm in his old age, but still not to be trifled with, right? So he definitely belongs in the wild wood. He's not as calm and peaceable as the riverbankers. Okay, good. Nice job, Mary. Thank you. All right, so we have the wild wood just beyond the riverbank. There's a quote I want to make sure and include. I just discovered it as we were talking about the wild wood. What Rat says that might be the heart of the riverbank, he says, what it hasn't got is not worth knowing. Excuse me, it's not worth having. And what it doesn't know is not worth knowing. And the reason that I want to make sure and put that in the notes, I'll get to you in a minute, Carrie Ann. The reason I want to put that in the notes is because this is the way Rat sees the world. There's nothing beyond the riverbank that's worth having. And that may or may not be true as borne out by the story. So let's keep that in our minds. Is there anything beyond the riverbank that's worth having or worth knowing? Is adventure beyond one's home worth it in any way? What does our author have to say about that? All right, but I'm getting ahead of myself. It looks like we have a question about what a stoat is. A stoat is kind of like a weasel, but thicker and bigger. So still from that family of creatures. You should look up a picture of it. That's what a stoat is. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, Evan, will you tell me about the wide world, this last setting that we have alluded to in the story? What is the wide world?
Can you hear me?
I sure can.
So, the wide world, it's past the wild wood. What Rat says,
Okay.
and it's really like busy, like it's like not as calm, like in like near like the riverbank in the woods. It's really like peaceful, sort of. You have this like sort of peace, but in like the wide world, like beyond that, it's sort of like it's not that same like feeling. It's more like busy and like there's lots of like there's like it's like feel like there's like a little too much excitement.
Yes, good. Lots of excitement, kind of frantic, frenetic activity, no rest, right? Do the animals go there a lot? Do they have relationships? Rat said he'd be friends with some wild wooders. Is he friends with anyone in the wide world?
No.
No. What is Rat? Rat's kind of our lens through which we see all these settings. What does he say about the wide world?
He says that
he's pretty strong about it.
Oh yeah, because beyond the wild woods comes the wide world, said Rat, and that's something that doesn't matter, either to you or to me. I've never been there and I'm never going, nor you either, if you've got any sense at all. Don't ever refer to it again, please. So he doesn't really like the wide world, because I think he just like wants to stay in like a calm area where he is by the riverbank.
Yes, very good. He definitely wants to stay in the quiet of the riverbank, but there's something about this wide world. Perhaps it's the busyness and the franticness and the pace of life. Something about it that Rat says you wouldn't go if you had any sense, right? You won't go either, Mole. That's not where you go to find happiness. Happiness is here. The river has everything you need.
It's because it's not as homey as the woods to them, because since they're animals, it doesn't really feel like home to them, because it's more like it's just like nobody really cares there, because it's just like so busy and everybody's like, it's like, but like in the woods, it's like everybody like has like their homes and stuff, so it's like not the same atmosphere sort of.
Good. Not the same homey atmosphere as the river, for sure. Good. Evan, thinking kind of ahead into our story, does anything important happen in the wide world?
Well, Toad
Mm.
gets captured and imprisoned in the wide world.
Yes, this is where Toad meets consequences.
It's sort of where Toad like changes.
Yes. Imprisonment. Does he change for the better out here?
Well, he sort of like he doesn't change like that well, but like because of his experience, he realizes that it was the foolish that he did that. And then so after he gets back to his friends, he realizes like not right as he's out there. Out there all he wants is like vengeance and revenge.
Yes.
But then he realizes that it was because of his own actions that got him in the prison. So
Mhm.
he eventually decides that like it was his fault because it was his own act that caused that to happen.
Good. So it is good for him in some ways. He has to take responsibility for his actions. But these consequences, are they close and personal? Is it a loving person saying to him, Toad, you need to face up to your sins? Or is it impersonal and cold and harsh consequence that he
Well,
faces
it's
on
kind
the
of harsh because it's like it's not they don't really care. They're just like he did something bad, so they just like all they want is that he needs it's like harsh.
world? Yes. Good. Very good. So this wide world, we definitely get to see the consequence of going out into the wide world. No one cares for you out there. You're on your own and it's dangerous, right? Dangerous and cold in some ways. Okay, good job. You guys did a great job of thinking through these settings, and I want to lead us directly in to our conversation about characters now as I keep an eye on our clock. Our characters we've touched a little bit on as we've thought about these settings, but notice as we go through them one by one the ways in which their setting emphasizes who they are. Okay, I've given us a really specific list, and you'll be sorry to see that there are some characters who are not present on the list, but you can choose whoever you'd like from our list, and I'd like us to do a quick character study of each one. So starting with whoever you'd like, Noah, who would you like to claim today and tell us about?
I want to do Toad.
Okay, please do. Who is Toad?
Until the end, he's really selfish. And he's obsessed with cars.
Just cars? Isn't
Money too.
Yes.
In his house.
Yes. Okay, let's think about this. He's obsessed with cars and money and his house. What does money and his house and all of these fads do for him? What is it that he really values underneath all of those things?
To be well known.
Yes. Very good. Well known by whom?
Just, I guess anybody really. He wants to be popular.
Good. He wants to be respected and popular. And the ways that he's going to get these things are, like you said, to be wealthy, to be famous, to have a lot of nice things, and to be the best at something. What things does he try to be the best at?
I don't think I know.
Well, where do we see Toad first?
I think he's trying to take Mole and the rat like on an adventure kind of.
In what?
In his car.
Okay, very good. Was this his first fad that we heard about? He had a canary colored cart, but that was kind of a new fad, right? A new thing he was trying. What did he try before that?
Did he try the boat?
Yeah,
And
he
he
tried
didn't
a
like
boat.
it.
And he even had a whole boathouse full of boats. He goes all in, right? He spends all of his money trying to be the best at something. And then when he finds out that he's not going to be the best at it in the first couple tries, does he spend time trying to be better?
No, ma'am.
No. If he can't be perfect right away, what does he do with it?
He gives it up.
Kicks it out and tries a new thing, right? What adjective could we use to describe this character quality?
Not very patient. Impatient.
Good. He's impatient. He's impetuous. Have you ever heard that word before?
Yes, ma'am, but I don't know what it means.
It basically means led by your emotions, right? Impetuous. You make rash decisions, which is exactly what he does. What does he lack? If we were going to say he was our protagonist, he would probably have to lack something or need something in his character. What does he lack most?
Maybe.
I'm seeing some good guesses in the chat box. I'm going to keep track of them.
He doesn't make the right decision a lot.
No, he rarely makes the right decision. I'm seeing some good things in the chat box here, and Noah, you and I can kind of look at them together here, but somebody says that he lacks compassion. Is this true? Kay, what do you think? Do you think Toad lacks compassion?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Well, I think that lacking compassion. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe to a degree, because he kind of disregards other people, because when he goes and rides the motor car over and over again, he just he crashes into a bunch of people without a regard for law.
Ah, very good.
And so he's not very considerate of other people.
Good.
And so maybe, I don't know, I feel like Toad could be a good animal underneath everything. He just needed training.
Yes, actually, Kay, I'm glad you said that. All of these things that he lacks, that's a big long list, and I don't think we've even covered it all. He's greedy, he's selfish, he's impetuous. Is he a terrible guy?
Well, it would seem, but I think that after reading the whole book, you realize that all he needed was guidance that was almost parental from his friends.
Yes, very good. Yeah. What do other people say about him? What do his friends say about him? They acknowledge that he lacks all these things.
And they're still his friend. They call him dear old Toad, poor old Toad.
Yes. Very good. He's dear old Toad. Otter says, he's such a good fellow, but no stability, right?
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Lacks stability, especially in a boat. And then they laugh, right? When he is mean to Ratty and talks about the river badly, what is Ratty doing in that moment? They're out on a journey, and Rat has actually left his river. Why has he left his river? What motivated him to leave the best place in the world?
To protect Toad.
Yes, to protect Toad, because Toad needs it. If anybody's going to get taken advantage of, it's going to be Toad. Does this say something positive about his character as well as the obvious negative? If he's easy to take advantage of, what must he be?
He must be Toad, you mean?
Yeah.
He must be kind as well. Sorry about that noise. My tile's getting ripped up.
Oh, that's okay. He needs direction. He's young. He's too trusting. He's maybe gullible. He actually needs some protection, right?
It reminds me, have you read the Wing Feather Saga, Miss Andrews?
I haven't. So many of you have told me to read it, though, so I have it in my notes. I really want to. Is there a character in there that he reminds you of?
Yes. So his name is Kalmar, and his older brother Janner is supposed to protect him, and he's always following him and trying to protect him like Ratty and Toad. That just reminded me of that.
I love that. Maybe he got his inspiration from Kenneth Graham. I think that
Probably.
the description of Toad that you've given us is really wonderful and well-rounded. Excellent. Thanks, Kay. All right, so this is a pretty good treatment of Toad. He's not such a bad character after all, but there's some obvious weaknesses for sure. Let's grab another character that we have so many to cover, and I want to make sure that we do a quick treatment of each. Alex F., who would you like to talk about?
Okay, I want to do, I'll do Ratty.
Okay, please do.
One question, Pan.
Who's Pan? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Yes, we are going to talk about him, and I probably will be the one to talk about him. I'm not sure anybody knows. If anybody does know who Pan is, Luke does. Way to go, Luke. Luke is the Greek god of the wild. Have you ever heard of him before?
Actually, I remember him now. I read about him in the book. I just forgot.
Well, it's funny that we are reading this book right after The Secret Garden, because we actually had a reference to Pan in The Secret Garden, too. Do you remember which character reminded us of him?
No.
It was Dickon. Dickon in The Secret Garden reminded us of the Greek god Pan playing on his little pipes. And when he played on his pipes, the animals came rushing to him, right? He's the Greek god of the wild things, of nature. And all the animals love him, and he kind of takes care of them. So in some ways, he's like a god figure in the story. And there's a chapter in our book, just one chapter, where Pan comes in. And what does he do?
He just says, "Hello, Ratty," and then he goes away. But Ratty and Mole have this feeling, and then afterward they feel drowsy.
We feel drowsy and sleepy and safe, right? So he comes into our story for only one chapter and brings, what would you say his effect on all the Riverbank community is? He does something really important in a plot element.
He adds an element of safety and also
Doesn't he restore a little lost character to his family again?
Oh yeah, Otter's son. He went missing.
Good. Yes. So this god figure steps into the story, sets everybody at peace, ensures that they know they are very little and he is very big, and then he restores a little otter kid to his dad. He kind of intervenes in the story and fixes everything and then leaves. And we'll talk about the purpose of that little chapter in a minute, but I wanted you to make sure and know who Pan was, or else that chapter is really confusing. Good. Well, Alex, I did unmute you to talk about Ratty, though. So you want to tell me about Ratty before I move on?
Yes, he seems like he seems to be very, even though he can be good-natured, he seems very stubborn since he doesn't really think of anything else but his river. Even though the river is good, there can still be other good things outside of the river. So
yes, but he doesn't seem to think so. Has he already experienced those things beyond the river? Has he gone to the Wild Wood, for example?
Yeah, to visit Badger once.
He's gone there. He knows what he thinks about that already. How old would you say Ratty is?
About the same age as Mole.
Really?
Yeah, seems like it. He seems like in the prime of his life.
Okay. He's maybe middle-aged, in the prime of his life. I like that.
And he also doesn't seem to mind about comfort. He just likes to live by the river.
Yeah.
Even he talked about how in the flood season his home would flood, but he wouldn't mind and stuff.
Yeah. There are negative things about living where he lives, but he loves those too. He has decided what he likes and what he doesn't. Does he know himself?
Yes.
Yeah, he's confirmed and decided and comfortable with himself. Do you think he's thinking of himself all the time?
No, he's very selfless.
Yeah, how do you know?
Because he goes to help Toad, and then when Mole's in the Wild Woods, he rushes after him, like to help him.
Good.
And also Ratty also really likes boating. Like there's this at the back of the book. Can't really remember it, but it said there's nothing half as much doing as just sitting around and messing around with boats. Something like
Good.
that.
Messing about in boats, absolutely, which was very funny because then he kind of went off into a little dreamland thinking about messing around in boats and totally crashed and like went backwards and his heels are up over his head and he's still saying it, right?
Yeah. And he also is, when he's in his house, sometimes he just sits down and jots down poetry what comes to his mind. Like not really thinking about it, just writing it down what comes in his mind.
Yeah, absolutely. He knows what he likes and he is comfortable and settled and homey and he knows himself well enough that he can think about other people too, which is a pretty wonderful quality. Very good. We're going to talk a little bit when we get to the events of the story about a wonderful scene between Rat and Mole that evidences who is really older than who. We've got Mole needing to ask forgiveness of Ratty and Ratty extending forgiveness to Mole. And it's a really beautiful scene, but we'll get to that in just a moment. Before we do, we have Badger and Mole left to cover, and I want to make sure that we talk about them quickly. So, James, you have had a turn already, and I haven't talked to Miranda very much yet. Miranda, is yours a question, or do you want to come on mic? Because I want to give the next one to someone who hasn't spoken yet, and both of you have. So tell me in the chat box if you have a question that's pressing. Okay, I'm going to wait on you for a moment, Miranda and James, and give a new person the chance to talk. So, Allison, who would you like to grab today?
Hi, can I get Badger?
Absolutely. Tell me about Badger.
He's my favorite character, and he's very hospitable when like the Ratty and Mole get lost.
Good.
He takes them in, them sleep at his house. He's nice and generous, but I don't think he's very sociable.
Okay.
And kind of
for sure.
Himself. Yeah.
He keeps to himself. Would you say that Badger has lived a lot of life?
I think so. I think he's out of the 4 friends. I think he's the oldest because he shows more discernment and wisdom when it comes to problems.
Yeah. Which scene are you thinking of in which he shows discernment? That's a great word choice.
Probably when it comes to Toad, like he comes and he's stern with him instead of like, oh, poor Toad. But he cares for Toad, so he uses sternness for Toad's good.
Yes. So he's capable of disciplining with love, which takes a really mature person.
Mm-hmm.
So I would agree with you that he's our most mature character. Good. And we've already mentioned he lives in a dangerous environment without fear, which tells us something about his strength, right?
Yeah. He lives he lives underground with like lots of tunnels and storehouses. So he's very prepared and he's a hard worker because when it gave the tour of his house, he has like storerooms piled with food.
Good. Oh, I forgot this. Eli's mentioning in the chat box that he knew Toad's dad. Do you remember that, Allison?
Yes, I think it was more towards the end when they were talking about Toad's secret tunnel. He said he knew Toad's dad and they were good friends.
Very good. So it makes all of our characters that we've been spending the whole book with feel like young whippersnappers compared to Badger, right? Who's been here for ages and has the wisdom of the ages on him.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Excellent. Allison, I love that Badger is your favorite character. I really like him too. He's ancient. Very good. All right, we do have one more character before we can turn to our plot chart, and I am glad that we left him for last because he is in the running as one of our protagonists for sure. But who can tell me a little bit about Mole? It will be sort of review because his setting is so wrapped up with his character, but Evangeline, will you get us started and then I'll call in a couple more?
Okay, but I had a question about Wind in the Willows.
Okay.
Is it like a world that has talking animals combined with human beings?
Do you mean in the wide world, are there people?
Yeah, and why aren't the people so shocked that the animals can talk?
That's a great question. I'm really glad you asked it. In worlds like this one, sometimes the author bends the rules a little bit. And I think that we're supposed to, here's the phrase, willing suspension of disbelief. We're supposed to just take it as the rules of this world and not wonder about it, which is hard. It's hard to do. But I think that the human beings and the animals interact in this story and aren't shocked by each other.
Oh, okay, but how come the horse doesn't talk? The horse that pulls the canary cart.
Well, you'll notice it is mentioned that Mole has long conversations with the horse. We just don't get to know what the horse says. So I think the horse is supposed to have talked as well, but he's not treated like a character the same way. I don't know why.
Oh, okay.
Well, can you tell me a little bit about Mole, Evangeline?
So he's not contented with his house at the beginning, and he wants adventure, so he goes to the riverbank, and then he doesn't get contented there, so he goes into the forest.
What does he find in the forest?
He gets scared and nervous, and he starts seeing things in the trees like faces. And he thinks the branches are arms that are gonna get him.
Good. Yes, he has a terrifying experience where he's afraid and alone. Who comes to save him?
Ratty.
Yes. And in this moment, we kind of have a moment of decision for Mole a little bit. He's saved by relationship with Ratty, and he goes back home and is content there on the riverbank for the rest of our story, right? Okay.
Yes.
What do you think Mole finds that satisfies him? What makes him ultimately content in the story?
That he doesn't want any more adventures, I guess.
Yeah. This adventure has been enough for him, and he will be satisfied forever now on the riverbank. With whom?
Ratty.
With Ratty. There's something about friendship and relationship that draws him back again to the river. So interesting. If you were going to say one thing that Mole wanted at the beginning of the story that he didn't have, what would it be?
A friend.
Seems pretty alone at the beginning of the story. And then he meets Rat, and from there our story progresses. He leaves Rat in that one moment, and that turns out to be a bad thing. And Rat comes to save him, at which point Mole is headed for home again and stays there for the rest of the story. So, something perhaps about friendship. If we pursued Mole as our protagonist, friendship might be at the heart of things. We'll see if that's true with our other protagonist as well. But before we move on, is there anything else we need to note about Mole's character, the personality that he has, Evangeline?
He can get very excited.
Okay. What do you mean? What scene are you thinking of?
When they're about to attack Toad's house, and when they're attacking it, he gets very active and he starts yelling.
Yes, very good. He's excitable in the attack scene for sure. Good. I like the moments where we see how young he is, how in awe he is of other characters, and humble about his own self, right? Very good. All right, this is a great introduction to each of our characters, but the way that we get to know characters more is, of course, by going through our plot chart. So I want to go ahead and do that with you now. I've got our plot chart here. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so that you can see it all at once. There we go. And I might have to change the size of my little bubbles as we go, which I can totally do. Let's begin where we always do, with a brief summary of the exposition, thinking about Mole as our protagonist at first. And we might change gears and think about Mole and Toad side by side eventually, but let's just do a brief exposition. What happens to really start the interest in our story? We've already mentioned that Mole is whitewashing his lonely home underground one day, when what happens? What moves him out of this lonely state? Ethan H., do you remember? What actually moves Mole out of his hole at the very beginning of the story?
Well, he's tired of whitewashing and he wants adventure, and then he sees the rat.
Okay, good. Let's go to the very beginning and look at it together. Do you have your book with you?
Yes.
Okay. He's right there. And all of a sudden, you're right, he's done with whitewashing. He says, bother and oh blow and hang spring cleaning. But look in the next sentence there. Something up above was calling him imperiously. And he made for the steep little tunnel, which answered in his case to a graveled carriage drive. Something up above was calling him imperiously. What does that mean, the word imperiously? Do you know?
I'm actually not sure.
Imperious is basically like commanding, like from an authority. Something calls him. What do you think is calling him?
I don't think it's a person, but I just think it's his desire that's calling him.
Okay, maybe a desire, like an animal desire, like an instinct.
Yes.
Could be that. I like the way that it's described as a call, because it's almost like Pan, right? If we see him later in the story playing on the pipes, and then the animals all run to him, right? We have this imperious call, almost like from a god figure in the story, calling Mole up out of his hole to have an adventure that will change him. So perhaps a Pan-like call. At the very least, what time of year is it where this happens?
Probably about spring or fall.
It's springtime, yes. In the springtime, all animals are like this. They're restless in their holes, they jump out into the world, and they're experiencing life, right? Also, it's the time for rebirth. So Mole is kind of being born again at the beginning of this story. He's young and experiencing life for the first time. Good. All right, thank you, Ethan. Good job. So, if this is true, he leaves his hole, and where does the story really get started? He leaves his hole, he's looking for adventure. Where does he find it? James?
Sorry, you were lagging there for a second. What did you say?
Where does Mole go when he's looking for adventure?
Where does Mo go? Okay.
Uh-oh, did we lose you, James? We might have lost him because of internet connection. Carrie Ann, you're right. He goes on a walk, he goes outside, he discovers the river and a river rat. Very good. Okay, now there is one scene that I think solidifies our character list and gets us started in the story. And it seems like not a big deal at the beginning. He goes on an adventure on the river with Ratty, and he begins to envision himself as a riverman himself. And in order to be a true river animal, you have to know how to row a boat in this society. Does Mole know how to row a boat? Is he experienced already? No. Does he know how to swim? No. He's grown up in a hole. There's no opportunity for that, right? Okay. Is he patient with himself where these things are concerned? Does he say, Ratty, will you please teach me how to row? No. Can somebody come on mic and tell me how he really is in this scene? Chrome, do you remember? He begins to want to row this boat. He wants to be a capable riverman himself. What does he do? And Chrome, it looks like you're unmuted. Are you there? Okay, Chrome's having some trouble here. Carrie Ann, good. He takes the oars. He rips them out of Ratty's hand. Jack, are you there? Can you tell me a little bit about this? He's jealous. Good, Evangeline. Go ahead, Jack. Tell me about this scene where Mole gets impatient.
Wait, what was the question again?
So, can you tell me about the scene where Mole wants to row the boat?
Well, Mole gets impatient and he kind of secretly goes up behind Ratty and grabs the oars, and then the boat tips over when he tries to paddle it.
Yes, the boat tips over, and what happens as a result? He almost drowns, first of all.
Yeah. And then Ratty gets him on like a sandbank or something.
Yes, Ratty saves them.
Yep, and then Ratty dives in the water and gets all the things. That, like the lunch basket.
Yes, good. And when they're both safely ashore again with all of the things having been drug out of the river, do you remember what Mole says?
I forgot.
Let's read it together. It's on page 16 of my book, and it's just incomparable. Mole says, "The dismal Mole, wet without and ashamed within, trotted about till he was fairly dry, while the Rat plunged into the water again, recovered the boat, righted her, made her fast, fetched his floating property to shore by degrees, and finally dived successfully for the luncheon basket, and struggled to land with it. When all was ready for a start once more, the Mole, limp and dejected, took his seat in the stern of the boat. And as they set off, he said in a low voice, broken with emotion, 'Ratty, my generous friend, I'm very sorry indeed for my foolish and ungrateful conduct. My heart quite fails me when I think how I might have lost that beautiful luncheon basket. Indeed, I've been a complete ass, and I know it. Will you overlook it this once and forgive me, and let things go on as before?' All right, now, this is quite an apology. What does Mole say about himself, Jack?
Mole, he was saying I'm sorry, I just lost my temper, kind of.
Yes. Does he see himself clearly?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, he says he's got bad things in his heart. He's foolish and he's ungrateful, right? And
yep.
he's pompous and arrogant and impatient. And he says, "Please forgive me. I'm the worst." Does Rat forgive him?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. More than that, what does Rat offer him after this apology?
I think Rat does he offer him the Ratty will forget or not or Ratty will teach him how to row the boat?
Yes, he'll teach him how to row the boat. More than that, he'll give him a place to live. He basically says, "How about you stay and live with me and we'll be roommates?"
Oh yeah.
Wow, that's not what we expected. When you do something really bad and you have to ask for forgiveness, do you expect that that's going to create a friendship for you?
No.
No, that's not really what I think. I don't think, wow, the way to make friends is to be the worst. and to have to ask somebody to forgive me. But sometimes that's where the best friendships start. And indeed, it's true for Mole, right? He asks for forgiveness right here at the beginning, and that is the start of a beautiful friendship with Rat. Interesting. The reason I say that, the reason I draw attention to this scene right here is it's not the only time that repentance is necessary to start a beautiful friendship in this story. So if we start with Mole and we think about what he wants in the story, it might give us a framework with which to receive Toad's story. So that's the way I want you to think about this in answer to Anna's question from the beginning of our story. If we think about Mole as our first protagonist, his little character arc is quite short, actually. He comes in, he's young for a moment, and then he's immediately penitent, and it starts a beautiful friendship that he just lives in for the rest of the story. Toad is a harder case. He has to learn the same thing, but it takes him longer. So Anna, that's what I would say in answer to your question. I'm so glad you figured that out. I think you're right. Mole we start with, and his little conflict sets us off, but Toad is the one that we have to work through for the rest of the story. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and treat it that way. We'll ask our conflict question of Mole first and then of Toad. Sound good? Let's do that together. What does Mole want most at the beginning of the story? What does he want? And what does he lack? Okay, he wants adventure. Is that the only thing he wants? He wants friends. Okay, so Mole wants adventure and friendship. Okay, why can't he have that? Oh, good, very good, Mary. He wants to belong somewhere. Absolutely. Why can't he have it? What's in his way? Because of spring cleaning. Okay, he lives alone. What else? Is there something he's lacking that keeps him from being friends? He lives alone. One other thing, though, that he encounters right there at the beginning in that scene we just referenced. What was in the way of him being friends with Ratty? Ratty was the most friendly guy he'd ever met. Ah, yes. But his pride stood in the way. He thought he could do it himself, and it made him impatient, and it made him cruel even to Ratty. Very good. This would be a man versus himself conflict. Does his pride overwhelm him again after this moment? Ratty says, "Don't go into the wild wood. I already know, and I can tell you, nothing good is in there." Does Mole have to figure out for himself? Yes. So this comes up a couple of times, this man versus self conflict, where he ignores his friend and has to find out the hard way. Good. All right. So will Mole find adventure and relationship? Will he belong to a community? He's kind of in the way of his own conflict there. All right. Let's go ahead and chart our story as far as we can with Mole. Mole is looking for friendship. He meets Ratty, and Ratty says, "Come and live with me." We have one more little moment where he goes into the wild wood and needs help. Actually, nope, I think we need to do the Toad question as well so that we can do rising action all at once. The two kind of intermingle. Yes, Allison, that's a great point. Yes, Anna, let me call on you because I know you and I are thinking the same way where this is concerned. But what does Toad want that might be kind of similar to what Mole is looking for?
Well, I think that they kind of are similar because they both, in a way, don't really deserve friendship, but need it and get it.
They need it and get it, but they don't deserve it. Ratty forgives Mole, and Mole doesn't deserve it after what he's ruined. What about
yes?
Does Toad have friendships and doesn't deserve them?
Toad, he does all of these things that are wrong, and he's conceited and vain, and he's all about himself. And then when he comes home after his adventures, Ratty, Mole, and Badger, that's when he realizes he was wrong, when his friends show him, and he realizes what he has done and he doesn't deserve, like even Ratty says it, he doesn't deserve such good friends, and one day he won't have accepted them enough and he's going to regret it.
Good. He definitely needs friends to love him in spite of himself. So his himself is an obstacle for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There is one external conflict if we think about Toad, though. He wants to be accepted on the riverbank, but because of his issues in the wide world, his spot on the riverbank is actually threatened. Do you remember that part, Anna?
Yes.
Tell me about that. Who's threatening his place, his actual physical place on the riverbank?
It's the weasels and the stoats and all of the wild wooders. When he is gone, they think he's never coming back, and they take Toad Hall for their own.
Yes.
And Badger, Mole, and Toad and Ratty have to take it back at the end. And that kind of, I think, helps seal their friendship. Like one big thing, they pull it back, and that kind of brings them all together.
Good. I like that they prove their friendship towards him by helping him get his family home back. Yeah. I've just sort of put man versus man or man versus society there on that conflict. Do you think that works?
Yeah.
Because
I think that works.
Versus the stoats and weasels?
Yeah, I think that works.
Okay. Excellent. I love what you said, though, that conflict, that external one, just sort of emphasizes what's already going on in the internal one, that he wants acceptance. And this external conflict gives opportunity for his friends to kind of gather around him.
Yeah.
Good. Great comments, Anna. I want to hear more from you about that. Absolutely. Good. So I hope you guys can see, and I'm going to say this one more time to kind of help you follow along. We've got Mole wanting adventure and friendship. Mostly he wants to belong to a larger community. And his own pride is what gets in the way. Everybody wants to be friends with him, but he's got to get over himself first. We see the same kind of thing happening with Toad, right? He wants acceptance and belonging and respect, and yet he's not very respectable in some ways. His friends love him anyway, but he's looking up and out. He's not satisfied with the community, and so he looks out, and as a result, he might actually lose his family home and the belonging he already has because of his blindness, right? Okay, now let's put the events of our story in order really quickly in our rising action to kind of bring ourselves to a moment of climax. Okay, we're going to do the rising action next, but yes, Evan, go ahead and say something before we turn to rising action.
So, it was about Toad.
Okay.
I don't know if this should go in his character qualities, but I just sort of realized this, that Toad, it's kind of funny because he like because he has this like, he thinks he's like, it's like, I don't know how to say it. He thinks he's like very like knowing and like sort of like superior, but like
yeah,
everyone else knows that he's not. It's like that feeling like that that you think you're like this like super high in command person, but everybody else knows it's not. That's what I thought was kind of funny about Toad.
It is funny. I like that you brought that up, Evan. Does he know it about himself? Does he see it when it's pointed out?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, there's even a moment where Ratty looks at Mole when he's first introducing him to Toad, and Toad is being pompous and saying, "Look at my house, it's the best house on the river." And Rat looks at Mole like, "I told you, he's so full of himself." And Toad sees the look, and then he starts laughing at himself. And he's like, "Oh, Ratty, it's only my way," right? Yeah. Would you say that Toad is likable in spite of all his little foibles and problems?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. He's definitely supposed to be a character that we identify with and we feel for and we laugh at all at the same time.
Yeah, I just realized that. I thought it was really funny.
Yeah, that's a good comment. I'm glad that you brought our attention to that, Evan. Good. Well, let's step back and look at the rising action of our story. If it really begins with Mole and Ratty being friends, then one of the first things they do together as friends is go and see Mr. Toad, right? So we get Mole and Toad from the very beginning. What do they learn when they go to see Mr. Toad at the beginning? What's the first thing they learn from Mr. Toad? Miranda, do you know?
What's the question again?
Well, if we've got Mole and Ratty being new friends, their first adventure is to go and meet Mr. Toad. What do they learn in this first meeting?
Toad can be a little full of himself. He's a little bit prideful, but he knows how to have fun.
Okay, and what is his new way of having fun?
By laughing at himself, making jokes, saying he's the best.
Yes, very good. He's full of himself and yet still knows how to have fun. And he's got a new fad. What is his new fad?
Jokes about himself.
Well,
and
yes.
Motor cars.
Okay, all right. Now it's not motor cars first because they go on an adventure with him. The cart, very good.
Yellow
take to the road.
canary cart.
Yep, in a canary colored cart. The open road, right?
Right.
Okay, he convinces Rat to come with him and leave the riverbank. How is Rat's response to this adventure different from Mole's? Do you remember?
Mole seems a little excited about this because it's adventure. While Rat, he's like, I don't really want to do this because he loves his home, but he doesn't want to make Mole and Toad sad. So he's like, okay, I'll come along.
Yes, he doesn't want to make them sad. Is there any other reason that he would do this? He doesn't want to. It's not for him. But he doesn't want to disappoint Mole, and there's one other reason.
Because he wants to stay friends with Mole.
Definitely. Why does he do it for Toad?
He does it for Toad because he wants to be there because he knows Toad is going to get in some trouble.
Yes, very good. He wants to protect him. He's wiser than Toad, he's older than Toad, and he can sacrifice his own wants to keep an eye on Toad. This is very wise, given what happens next. What happens next, Miranda?
Toad isn't really paying attention because a motor car just went by and he crashes the cart. And it's not really salvageable. Yeah. And he just sits in the middle of the road going boop, boop.
Boop, boop. I thought that was so funny. So he's in an instant overwhelmed by a new fad and he forgets all about them, right?
Right.
Very good. This is a key plot point. Toad is in the throes of a new fad, and lucky for Rat, he has to go home to regroup and get into the new thing. But Rat and Mole, as a result, are worried about him, but they do get to go back home again. This is, of course, where Mole has his adventure in the Wild Wood, I'm pretty sure. Is that right, you guys? Is this interlude where Mole goes to the Wild Wood? Okay. Mole goes to the Wild Wood and learns for himself that the riverbank is best, thanks to Ratty and his friendship. Okay, and we talked about that a little bit already. Good. In the Wild Wood, we learn one more important thing that spurs the rising action onward. When Ratty and Mole make it to Badger's house, Badger has some information for them about Toad, right? They all talk together about the problem that is Toad, and what do they learn has happened to Toad? Stephen, do you remember? When we're talking with Badger, what's the problem with Toad on the table?
I think it's that Toad is getting too reckless and wasting his father's money.
Yep, he's wasting his father's money with this obsession with motor cars. He's getting out of control. What is the end goal of this going to be?
He's gonna end up in jail and hurt people.
Yes. What does Badger advise?
That that he talks to him and tries to talk him out of his ways and make him realize.
Yes. Does this work?
It worked it seemed like it worked, but then Toad just went right back to his ways.
Toad won't listen to anyone. He does end up in jail for a time, doesn't he?
Yep.
Okay. Is this a climactic moment? Does the story end sadly?
No.
What happens?
I don't know exactly who it is, but a girl or something says if Toad gives her sibling or family member some money, she'll help him escape.
Okay, so Toad deceives and disguises himself and goes and encounters some subterfuge, to use our new word, and escapes dressed as a washerwoman, right?
Yep.
Absolutely delightful. I loved that whole scene. He escapes dressed as a washerwoman, he jumps in the river and makes it home again. Let me ask you this. Is that the end of our story? Toad has escaped, he's made it back home again. What kind of a Toad is he? Is he humbled? Is he changed?
No. He's like singing to himself how clever and good he is.
Aha! In fact, it might be worse than ever, right? Can you take me to this scene, Stephen? Do you remember where this is?
It's like at chapter 9 or something.
Uh-huh. Yes. Let's go there together. I'm going to give you a chance to find it, Stephen, and all the rest of you, if you have your book with you, find me this scene where he's made it home again, but he's more conceited than ever. Mr. Toad. Let's see. Toad's Adventures. I've got to find my little section. Oh my goodness. I think it is chapter 10. Okay, here it is. It's in the chapter Like Summer Tempest Came His Tears. Thank you, Anna. It's chapter 11. Thank you for your patience, everyone. I gotta just start from the beginning. The rat put out a neat little brown paw, gripped Toad firmly by the scruff of the neck, and gave a great hoist and a pull. And the waterlogged Toad came up slowly but surely over the edge of the hole, till at last he stood safe and sound in the hall, streaked with mud and weed to be sure, and with the water streaming off him, but happy and high-spirited as of old, now that he found himself once more in the house of a friend, and dodgings and evasions were over, and he could lay aside a disguise that was unworthy of his position, and wanted such a lot of living up to. "Oh, Ratty," he cried, "I've been through such times since I saw you last you can't think. Such trials, such sufferings, and all so nobly borne. Then such escapes, such disguises, such subterfuges, and all so cleverly planned and carried out. Been in prison, got out of it, of course. Been thrown into a canal, swam ashore. Stole a horse, sold him for a large sum of money. Humbugged everybody, made 'em all do exactly what I wanted. Oh, I am a smart Toad, and no mistake. What do you think my last exploit was? Just hold on till I tell you." So, it's confirmed at this point. Has Toad changed in essence at all? Has his conceit, taken a hit as it should have, since he actually has been thrown in prison for doing horrible things. No, Danielle, you're right. He's actually extra worse. He's bragging now about having ruined public property and being put in prison. He does not see himself at all. What takes the wind out of his sails in this scene? What is it that brings him up short? You're right that it's his friends, but it's his friends with a little extra help. There's an event that has happened that he doesn't know about. Yes, very good, Mary. He's told that his house is stolen, right? Yes, Kay, we will read the Song of Toad very shortly. His house has been stolen by the Stoats and the Weasels. And what kind of a threat does this pose to our conflicts? Let's review here. Mole wants adventure and friendship. Toad wants acceptance, belonging, and respect. And he's got a family home on the riverbank that now is being threatened. And if he loses Toad Hall, then who is he really? Who is Toad without Toad Hall? His reputation would be destroyed, right? He discovers that his ancestral home has been taken over in his absence, and he will lose his place in the community. All right, now we're getting somewhere, right? This really could end his involvement in the community, and we have both his identity and his self-importance being threatened. What is the climactic moment of this story, would you say? Tell me quickly, what happens as a result of this new threat, the Stoats and the Weasels? Does Toad lose his home? Chrome, do you remember? Okay, you have it? Go ahead.
I think it's when the toad and the mole and the rat all go in and fight the Stoats and the Weasels.
Okay. Toad, mole, rat, otter, and badger all go and fight for Toad Hall and win. Okay. Is that the climax? Does that resolve all of our tensions?
Could you scroll down so I can see the conflict?
Yeah, does that make him, actually, does that make him respectable? Do they accept him in his form after he's gotten Toad Hall back? Is he a changed Toad?
Yes, it talks about at the banquet in chapter 12 how much more modest he was.
Really? At the outset?
But before the dinner, he was planning to make all the speeches and songs and everything about his bravery. But during the banquet, it said that he was modest.
Good, very good. Somewhere in there, he realizes that he actually owes this victory to whom?
To Mole.
Mm-hmm.
That's who he keeps owing it up to, the rat. I mean, the badger, sorry.
Yes. Very good. He realizes that he couldn't have done it without his friends and sees himself as quite conceited, and as a result doesn't give the speech he thought he would right there at the end, right? His speech that he almost gives really is funny though. I almost kind of want to go to it. Do you have it with you, Kay?
Yes, I think I do. Let me find it. Oh, is it Toad's last little song?
Yes. Yep.
Yes, I have it.
Go ahead, read it to me.
The toad came home. There was panic in the parlor and howling in the hall. There was crying in the cowshed and shrieking in the stall when the toad came home. When the toad came home, there was smashing in of windows and crashing in of door. There was pestering of weasels that fainted on the floor when the toad came home. Bang go the drums, the trumpeters are tooting, and the soldiers are saluting, and the cannons they are shooting, and the motor cars are tooting as the hero comes. Shout, Hooray! Let each one of the crowd try and shout it very loud in honor of the animal of whom you're justly proud, for it's Toad's great day.
Excellent reading, Kay. That was magnificent. Loved the emphasis. You absolutely nailed it. And
Thank
let's
you.
read a little further here. He sang this very loud with great unction and expression, as Kay has done. And when he had done, he sang it all over again. And then notice, then he heaved a deep sigh, a long, long, long sigh. And then he gets his hairbrush in the water jug and parted his hair in the middle. And from then on, he re-enters the crowd. And what does he say? Does he ever say, I'm so awesome, Toad is so great?
He says when all the animals crowd around him, he goes, oh, it was nothing. It was really nothing at all.
Yes, he says, not at all. On the contrary. No, it was Badger who was the mastermind, and Mole and Water Rat bore the brunt of the fighting. I served in the ranks and did little or nothing. Notice, the animals were evidently puzzled and taken aback by this unexpected attitude of his, and Toad felt, as he moved from one guest to the other, making his modest responses, that he was an object of absorbing interest to everyone. So he still loves the fact that he's the center of
Yes, yeah.
He's not conceited the same way, and I wonder if this long, long, long sigh is his moment of revelation, that he can't really do this. He owes his victory to someone else.
Mhm.
What do you think, Kay?
I'm pretty sure that is more the climax actually, because Toad, he really gets it. He gets his haul back, but here's when we're really sure that the internal conflict is uh is is just wound up. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. He, at the end of this section on the next page, there's this phrase, he was indeed an altered toad.
I love that. I
Isn't
just
that
think
fantastic?
altered Toad sounds so funny.
Yeah, an altered toad, a changed toad. And I actually should have started a little before. They ask for a speech from Toad, and we know that Toad has a speech, which you read us so beautifully, his song, his last song.
Yeah.
He refuses to give it, right? He only shook his head gently, raised one paw in mild protest, and by pressing delicacies on his guests, by topical small talk, and by earnest inquiries after members of their families, not yet old enough to appear at social functions, managed to convey to them all that this dinner was being run on strictly conventional lines. In other words, no, let's not talk about me, let's talk about you. Right?
It's really a change from at first.
Yes. It is indeed an altered toad.
Miss Andrews, I just realized that my book is abridged. You were reading.
Oh, really? So you don't have that section?
So I read an abridged version.
Oh, that's so funny.
It doesn't say it's abridged. Oh, it says it's adapted. I should have known.
Adapted. Okay, that's so funny. Well, there probably are little sections then that you have yet to read, which is actually just really fun. I would advise reading the whole thing because it's all delightful.
I will.
Thanks, Kay. You did such a good job today. Thanks for reading. Okay, so I think I'm with Kay that the overarching conflict, the question of whether Toad is going to be a humbled Toad and accepted by his community, is answered when he gets Toad Hall back and refuses to give his Toad-centered speech, right? No speeches at all. If this is true, what's the conclusion of our story? What do you think? What belongs in the conclusion? James, do you know? What would you put in the conclusion? After Toad is a changed Toad. Kay says, I don't know. I don't have a conclusion in my book. The rest of you who didn't read an abridged version, there is one long paragraph left, and it tells us what becomes of all the animals. And I think it's important to note that Mr. Toad has a reputation on the riverbank from here on after. And I'm just going to read it to you, hearing no takers here. Sometimes, in the course of long summer evenings, the friends would take a stroll together in the wild wood, now successfully tamed so far as they were concerned. And it was pleasing to see how respectfully they were greeted by the inhabitants. and how the mother weasels would bring their young ones to the mouths of the holes and say, pointing, "Look, baby, there goes the great Mr. Toad. And that's the gallant water rat, a terrible fighter, walking along with him. And yonder comes the famous Mr. Mole, of whom you so often have heard your father tell." But when their infants were fractious and quite beyond control, they would quiet them by telling how, if they didn't hush them and not fret them, the terrible gray Badger would up and get them. This was a base libel on Badger, who, though he cared little about society, was rather fond of children, but it never failed to have its full effect. So if it's something that Toad wants, if reputation is something Toad wants, does he get that in the end? What do they say about him forever afterward? What kind of a toad is he, according to lore and legend? Tell me in the chat box. He's the great Toad, right? Is it because he's told the whole world that he is great? No. It's by no tooting of his own horn, if you will. He gets what he wants, but not the way that he planned it. Toad and his friends live in light of their victory and have great reputations without trying. All right, excellent. And most importantly, Allison, his character changes for the better. You're right. So with our remaining minutes here, let's talk about theme. What big ideas has our story been about? James, absolutely. Do you have an idea for theme already?
I thought of change.
Tell me about that.
Friendship. Well, since Toad was a little bit mean and selfish at the beginning, just didn't know how to look out for himself, he changed at the end, but by didn't expecting what he wanted. And the friends were very loving and forgiving, even though some of the other friends didn't deserve to be forgiven.
Yes, very good. Let's talk about the friendship one first, James, and then the change one. I like that as well. What is a good friend according to the friendships in our story? What does a good friend look like in our story specifically, James?
A good friend?
Yes.
Maybe a loyal friend who cares for his other friends and wants to help them and forgive them, even though sometimes they don't deserve it.
Yeah, very good. We actually see, I didn't even think about this, but do you remember the scene where Rat almost leaves his riverbank because he's called by the sound of adventure in the sea?
Yeah.
And Mole watches this come over him and knows that if Rat were in his right mind, he wouldn't want to leave the riverbank. What does he do to keep Rat from going?
So what does he do to keep Rat from going? Were you asking me that?
Yes.
So what does he do to keep Rat from going?
Yeah, what does he do to keep Rat from going to the ocean?
Is there a part where that tells?
Yeah. Doesn't Mole jump on him? He physically.
He does jump on him. Yeah.
You know?
That's an unusual way to do it, but
yeah. It's not subtle. But when Rat comes to himself again, is he glad that Mole kept him there?
I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like a really dramatic example of the thing that happens all along in this story. Friendship is loving the other even when they don't deserve it or when they don't even want you to, right? He basically jumps on top of him and says, you know what? I know you. I know you better than you know you. Let me give you grace. Let me help you. Wow, that's powerful. James, what was the theme of change that you wanted to talk about?
Well, like I said, when Toad at the beginning, he was selfish and did not know how to look out for himself. Didn't really much of care for others at the beginning, but at the end he did change. He became a little bit nicer and there were some speeches about him, and he was called the great Mr. Toad.
Okay, was it because he truly was great?
I think he was great all along, no matter what. That's my opinion.
I think he was pretty great too. I think he actually was great. But did he have to establish his own reputation?
No.
No. When was he the greatest, in your opinion?
I think at the end, because when I read the end chapter, I said, wow, Toad has really changed. I think he's even more great.
Yes. When was he the greatest? At the very end? What made him the greatest?
What made him the greatest?
What changed in him that made him even better?
Well, here's a line here. He was indeed an altered Toad. There's a big paragraph right here. After this climax, the four animals continued to leave their lives so rudely broken and upon by civil war, in great joy and contentment, undisturbed by further risings or invasions. Toad, after due consultation with his friends, selected a handsome gold chain and locket set with pearls, which he had dispatched to the gaoler's daughter with a letter that the batter admitted to be modest, grateful, and appreciative, and the engine driver in his room was properly thanked and compensated for all his pains and trouble. Under severe compulsion from the badger, even the barge woman was with some trouble sought out, and the value of her horse discreetly made good to her, though Toad kicked terribly at this, holding himself to be an instrument of fate, sent to punish fat women with muddled arms who couldn't tell a real gentleman when they saw one. The amount involved, it was true, was not very burdensome. The gypsy's valuation being admitted by local assessors to be approximately correct. So I think his journey changed him.
Yes, I think so too. His journey changed him and his friends, right? The community that he was a part of helped give him perspective on himself too. But I like that. His journey out into the wide world changed him. So there's something about the wide world and then coming home again that leads you to see yourself, right?
I think it kind of reminds me of Lord of the Rings with the hobbits and everything.
What do you mean?
Well, like when they went on that big journey to find the ring, and then when they got home.
Yes, they were changed by their journey.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good comparison, James. Something about the journey changes them and gives them sight of themselves. I love it. Well done, James. I see I have a lot of other hands, so I want to make sure and spread the love here. We have a couple minutes left of class. Evan, do you have other things to say about the theme?
No, my hand. Oh, I do. I wanted to say that like friends remained loyal and that like they always go back for like each other even if like they don't deserve it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, loyalty in spite of the undeserved qualities in your beloved, right? Absolutely. Yeah. We see that with Mole needing to be forgiven in spite of the fact that he was the worst to Rat, and Rat extending that forgiveness. The same with Toad later. Definitely a theme. Good. Thanks, Evan. How about you, Kay? Final themes to add to our plot chart?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot to put my hand down.
No problem. I should have done that for you. I forgot. Go ahead, Allison. How about you?
Well, I think true friendship is really shown here, how they were so loyal and they forgave each other because they all like had mistakes.
Yep, absolutely. So forgiveness is a good quality.
Uh-huh. And I think when Rat and Badger were talking to Toad, Rat said, when he was talking to him, I am doing this for your good, and it is hurting me as much as it is hurting you, but yes. I want to do it for your good.
Absolutely, that's very good. Some kind of sacrifice for the other. I'm doing this for your good. And can't you see this isn't easy for me? I like that. Good, Allison. How about you, Alex? Final themes to add to our plot chart?
Actually, I had a different thing.
A different thing? Go ahead.
So, we read a book called The Witch of Blackbird Pond.
Oh, yes. I love
And
that.
I thought of this chart and the character describing, and I thought that it was a really great book that you could describe the characters and theme.
Mm.
And I really wanted, I was wondering if I could have like a copy of the chart and the
Yes,
right down.
absolutely, to do with the Witch of Blackbird Pond. So I think we have a blank story chart in your classroom that you can print off and use on your own with whatever book you want. If you remember these basic questions that we ask, and I would totally advise it, Alex. That would be a great discussion. Do you know where that is in the classroom?
No.
Okay, so where you go to get the recordings, do you remember where you go for that? In the class work section? There should be a list of documents up above where your recordings are, and there's one called blank story chart. It's in materials. So they should be right there. When you go to look for your recording in the class work section, look for the blank story chart.
Okay.
And it's right there.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Alex. Have fun with that. That's a great idea. All right, a couple more questions and then I'll send you off into the world, everyone. How about you, Anna S?
Can you hear me?
I can.
I think most of the people ahead of me have already said this, but I really think that it's like I said when we were talking about conflict.
Yeah.
The main theme of the story is kind of just that even when somebody doesn't deserve friendship, they kind of need it in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And when they get it, it's kind of like them getting friendship can show them that they need to change. Like, I kind of feel like that is one of the things that helped Toad, is that I don't really think that he would have changed if his friends hadn't been there to kind of ease him into changing and like force him to change.
Yeah,
the better.
He was improved by their input. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. That's good, Anna. Your comments were so good today. I wish I
Thank
could have
you.
had way more conversation with you about it. And if you want to, we should email. Thanks, Anna. Fantastic. What a great book. All right, Ethan, go ahead. Do you have a question for me, Ethan H? Or a comment to add to theme?
For the theme, I think a good friend is someone that's really loyal. That would be a very good theme element.
Yes. Loyalty. I think I've got that right here. True friendship is loyalty and love. Does that work, Ethan?
Yes.
Good. I like that. Who did you see who was particularly loyal in this story?
Ratty and Mole and Badger.
Yes, actually, lots of friends in the story are quite loyal, which is another way that you can tell it's a theme in the story, if lots of friends share the same quality. Good. I love it. Thanks, Ethan. Well, I like yours too, Allison. True friends are always loyal and there for each other, sticking together through thick and thin, even hurting each other for their own good. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, comes to mind. Good. You guys, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation today. It's super fun to talk to you about all these ideas, and I'm glad you enjoyed this book as much as I did. James, I hope that you enjoyed this book more than you thought you would after we discussed it together, and I will look forward to hearing from you if it's otherwise. For next time, we are, of course, talking about Inkheart by Cornelia Funke on April 19th, and I look forward to talking to you about it then. Until then, everyone, happy reading, and I will see you next time. Bye!